Well, welcome to our guests here in the room, and welcome to students and guests who are visiting us from wherever you're visiting us. We're happy to be here tonight, and I am really excited about our guest, David Lee King. For those of you who are in 502, remember that you're going to need to create a reflection about this workshop. But I have to tell you that when I grow up, I want my slides to be as cool as David Lee King's. When I grow up, I want to have a design aesthetic like David Lee King. I want to be as concerned, although I want to be as concerned about customers and humanity and how those things connect with libraries as much as David Lee King does. David is always learning something, he's always testing something, and he's always sharing something. David is concerned about discovery, transparency, engagement, how to make our libraries exciting places both in them and outside of them. He reaches out to the community. I'll give you some details about him from his official biography. Officially, his title is Digital Services Director at Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, where he plans, implements, experiments with emerging technology trends. He has been, and still is, I suppose, a library journal mover and shaker, and he was selected in 2008. He is everywhere. Let me see, he's everywhere I am. On Flickr, on YouTube, and Facebook, and Twitter, on Google+, Foursquare, LinkedIn, Instagram, Tumblr, Goodreads, SlideShare, and Pinterest. David is connected. And what I think that means is that in this library world, relating to social media, we're all showing people what it looks like to be an information professional right now. We're amplifying the image of the profession. We're amplifying our voice and our connection with the people who count on us. And I think that's what really inspires me about David. Things that you may not know about David. He has been a customer service phone rep at a mutual fund company. He has been a disc jockey. I learned this afternoon that he lived in Nashville for a while and pursued his dream as a drummer there. Yes. And continues to drum. And we had music, but we didn't play it yet. We'll play music later. You delivered pizza.
Yes.
You've been a construction worker and a painter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well that's okay. And he has maybe 3 books. 3 books? 2 books. And the most recent is Face to Face, and I've been reading sections of it today and enjoying it and thinking about it as a text potentially. And so I am excited for you to meet David Lee King, and I think you will lust after his slides as well. So please, please help me welcome David.
I'm going to move the mic back up so you're not hearing my neck voice. Gee whiz, it's really weird to have the stuff I do be part of somebody's grade. So, sorry, I guess. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to talk about hackerspaces, hacking, making, and creating at the library tonight. And if you guys have a question while I'm going on, just feel free to interrupt and ask the question, because what you get out of it is much more important than what I say. So please do. And then we'll have probably some time for that at the end too.
Oh, could you keep on?
Cool. Too much. So basically this presentation will focus on about 3 areas. So talking about traditional libraries and how we've really been makers all along. What my community is doing, what some communities are doing, and just some cool stuff libraries are doing to meet this new service area. And maybe a little bit about where to start. So first of all, I'll just say this. We as libraries have always helped customers make stuff. You know, this whole concept of having a makerspace or a fab lab seems really new. It's not at all. This is a photo of an art library in 1954. They were helping people make stuff, were they not? They had books that showed you how to do oil paintings, how to do sculptures, that kind of stuff. That staff they were helping the creative people in their community make stuff. Not new at all. This is my library at a local artist event. The artist gave a talk. Again, that's a way to help these people make stuff. They came to get pointers, to get tips, to find out the philosophy behind the artist, that kind of thing. More crazy stuff. Edible book program at my library. This is my favorite one. That's just hilarious. So I'm not sure I would mix. I don't even know what the green grass stuff is. Guacamole, maybe? Or honestly, my first thing was green icing. I don't know. Mix that with broccoli. It's not very good. But again, we had a program to help people make stuff. It was sort of guided, but they were making things, right? And interpreting a book cover in this case. Even more traditional for libraries, craft time at the library. Public libraries anyway have had that forever. Guess what? We're helping people make stuff, right? This is a photo of University of Florida NaNoWriMo group. So it's that month, right? Anybody writing a book? You're all students. You're like, oh, somebody is. Okay, there we go. My library has a program like this too. We help the writers who are writing a book in the month of November write. And so they set up space and Wi-Fi and coffee and that kind of stuff for their writers, just as a more social gathering. Again, helping people make stuff. So how about the burly men who fix cars? I'm not one of those. Or burly women too. I'm not going to leave anybody out there, right? The library has Chilton Auto manuals that give you directions on how to fix stuff in your car. And people come in and don't check the books out, but generally rip the page out they need and leave. But that's just how it works in a public library. But again, we're helping people make and fix stuff. That's what libraries have always done. The difference is, we may have in the past been a bit passive about this, right? So the guy there, he's sitting behind, actually he looks like Les Nessman from that old WKRP and Cincinnati show. I'm not sure why, but I just noticed that. We've been a bit passive. We've sat behind the reference desk. We've waited for somebody to come ask us how to make stuff, and then instead of telling them how to make stuff or actively coming along beside them, we say, here's a book, now go away, go make stuff, be free. We're not helping, we are, but we aren't. And then when we get money and we can build a new library, we still build the same old desk, just in this case we made it orange or red to look hip somehow. A few years ago, when we were all involved in virtual worlds and Second Life, we did the same thing. We built a reference desk, an open reference desk. We put Yoda behind it, but okay.
Sage advice.
Yeah. Again, sort of passive, but that's okay, because we can change that. Meanwhile, what's going on in our communities? Our community wants more, actually. In almost every community I've seen, people are wanting to do things, and current technology has made making pretty cool stuff a lot easier to do. So, anybody know somebody who runs a business from their home? Yeah, okay, somebody does that, I think. You couldn't, it was harder to do that before, at least, this guy's got a couple of computers set up, he's got technology, he's got probably really good internet access, Wi-Fi access, that kind of thing. Really easy to do, within reach. Monetarily, it's within reach even. What do you think this person is doing?
Writing a screenplay.
Writing a screenplay, I like that one, yeah. She could be doing quite a few things, right? She could be shopping, writing a screenplay, running her business. Maybe she's a student, she's writing her paper about the stuff David Lee King said tonight. Oh my gosh. she could be doing any number of things. But the point is, she's got a way to do it. She's got Wi-Fi. She can post. If she's a student, she can post to the teacher's blog or email the homework or whatever you guys do these days and be done. Connect with the class, connect with the teacher. Self-publishing, not what it used to be, right? Ask the 50 Shades of Grey lady who was self-published author, now pretty stinking rich, right? Just because some of these services that are out there right now, CreateSpace, Lulu, etc., make it really easy to actually write a book and not have to go through the traditional publishing route, but you can do it in many different ways now. Again, actively making stuff. In the music world, this is somebody's really small home studio. You need a good computer, you need some ways to connect instruments and microphones to your computer, you need some mixing software. It's within reach. So for the more creative types. For the dudes who like the Chilton's manuals, anybody have a garage or know somebody with a garage that looks a little more like this? Yeah. The guy at the top obviously likes to work with his hands. He maybe fixes his motorcycle there, maybe does woodworking. My dad's garage would look a little more like this picture down here with electronic gadgets. My dad's a model train enthusiast, so lots of soldering and painting of models and that kind of stuff. Again, what are they doing? They're making stuff. It's a different way to think about it. So these guys, this kind of setup, or these, I think are missing a couple of things. And we're noticing this in our communities right now. 2 essential ingredients. Tools. Some tools, getting a laptop, that's doable now. But some tools are still pretty pricey. Not everybody's going to go out and buy a fancy 3D printer or a CNC router or some of those more expensive type tools, especially if it's something that you need once a year. Twice a year, maybe, depending on what it is you're doing. Kinko's and Walmart don't really stock these kinds of things, though Home Depot is starting to, I guess. So not something you really want to buy, but you could use once or twice a year. So tools are missing. Social is missing too. So people with the home-based business, I've met people like that before, and they say, you know what? I want to get out of the bedroom once in a while. I want to go socialize. I want to bounce ideas off of people. Even though I don't necessarily work with them, I just need some social. And I don't necessarily want to go to Starbucks and pay for it, right? By buying some coffee. And honestly, sometimes you can do this really well in the library, sometimes you can't. Because libraries aren't always set up that way. We've got hard chairs. We've got computer use at a limited amount of computer use sometimes, especially if you're using the library's computers. So just something to think about. But all that said, I think that libraries were made for this time. Here's a quote from Jeff Kroll, who recently retired. He was the CEO at Allen County Public Library. He says, "For many years, libraries have functioned in the role of supermarket, a place where the public has access to information and ideas. Now libraries are seeing their role evolving to incorporate elements of the kitchen, where we provide the actual tools for patrons to exercise their creativity and knowledge to produce things." Pretty cool idea, I think. And we'll see a slide from his library a little later on. So that you see that moving from passive to active in what Jeff Kroll said, going from the supermarket, yeah, we have stuff, buy it and leave, to here are the tools, come here's the space, here's the knowledge, let's make stuff together. Pretty cool idea, and that's why I think libraries are made for this time, because we already have that set up. We've been doing it for years. People come to us for that already. So, that said, what's happening in libraries right now? Let me show you what some of those emerging kitchens look like. So first for makerspaces, I'm using a general term. Sometimes they're called hackerspaces or fab labs. I just like to call everything makerspaces. It's easier, honestly. This is what some of them look like. This is the Hack Tree in Philadelphia, sort of close to here, I guess. Lots of soldering irons there. You'll see different types of hacker spaces and maker spaces. They look really different. Some are clean, some are dirty, depending on what they're doing, right? This is one in Allentown, Pennsylvania. They're just doing a class on Arduino type stuff. So there's actual doing. There's classes on how to make things better, how to do new things. Sometimes it looks a bit like this, honestly. Soldering irons or Arduinos. Sometimes 3D printers as well. Not the end-all be-all of a makerspace, but part of it. One part that you might have heard of and read about in the library world anyway. So one of the first makerspaces for a public library anyway was Fayetteville Free Library. They were actually given some space and a grant and decided to go for it. So they bought stuff, fixed up a room, and they made themselves what they call a Fab Lab. So they have, you can see there's a MakerBot 3D printer. Over on the sort of the edge of that slide, there's a vinyl cutter type printer thing. Usually they have, if they're going to have computers, they have Macs because they're cooler, I guess. They do. The cool thing about this particular space, though, is they also, besides like the 3D printers and all the routers and the cutting tool type things that they have, this is the jewelry making table. So they have jewelry kits. They have a sewing machine. So it's not just for a certain type of maker. It's for a lot of different types of makers. Another shot of a couple more 3D printers that they have. Mentioned Allen County Public Library. This is what they have. Right now, they're actually changing it. But so their main building downtown, Fort Wayne, Indiana, they parked this in their parking lot. Took up some spaces and partnered with this company called Tech Venture. And this is what it looked like inside. So they had different stations for making stuff. And since then, I've heard that they're expanding services. They bought a building a few streets down, still close to the library, and so they're going to have a bigger place now. So pretty cool, but very much a makerspace where you go in and they've got CNC routers and 3D printing and electronics tables, that kind of stuff. Very different than a normal public library, right? Space tends to be the thing in a library that's hard to find. What this library did, this is Westport Public Library, they removed some bookshelves. Everybody gasped. Oh. Oh. They removed some bookshelves and built this thing right in the middle of the library. Sort of a little makerspace pod. Pretty cool idea, I thought. Especially because, it's a public library. They decided, hey, what's more important here? We need this newer thing. So let's move some of the traditional stuff out of the way. Cool concept, I thought. Chattanooga Public Library. So they, a few years ago, had a change of administration, and the new library director got there. She hired some staff, and they discovered, hey, our 4th floor is a storage area. Why don't we remove all the stuff up there and make this? So they have turned the storage area on the 4th floor into a makerspace and event space. So they actually have like startup weekend type events. They do them there at the library. That's pretty cool. Chicago Public Library, they found space too. They found a classroom-sized space that was used for like special collections exhibits. They removed the special collections exhibits, put the stuff in there. So there's some tables, some computers you can use. Not Macs in this case. So it's not only, it doesn't have to be Macs. Lots of equipment like 3D printers and vinyl cutters, routers, that kind of thing, and a big workbench in the middle. they got a grant for this, and now I think they just got a new grant so they can start farming it out to some of their branches too. Pretty cool. So what's in a makerspace? Lots of stuff. It's much more than 3D printers. So, you know, a lot of you guys are maybe students right now. I hang out with library administrators who are like, oh, we need a 3D printer so we can have a makerspace. I'm like, no, you know what? You need a table. And jewelry making, you know, beads. Depending on what you want to do. You know, you got to really talk to your community and find out what they want. But so traditional makerspaces, if I can say that, have these kind of messy tools, vacuum cleaners, that kind of thing. Loud things, things that can cut off fingers sometimes. So your mileage may vary in your community and your city attorney and stuff like that. Someday you might have to work with that. I could have removed all that stuff and put jewelry making kits, sewing machines, quilting, we were mentioning that earlier, art type tools, that kind of thing. Again, it depends on what your community is focused on. So that was a makerspace. Now let's shift gears and talk about a type of makerspace for more creative artist types, which would be, sometimes they're called digital media labs. So here, probably the best way to describe that is to explain this picture. This is Lily, age 10, at Skokie Public Library. So she's holding a cup with a lot of weird handles on it. Her grandpa had Parkinson's disease, and she wanted to make a cup that he could hold without spilling. Pretty cool idea for a 10-year-old. Her dad's a designer, knows people, so they designed the cup, got help with through a local like makerspace in town. But then she wanted to set up a Kickstarter campaign. They used Indiegogo, but a Kickstarter type campaign to raise money to make the cup. She did that at the library with their digital media lab because they had video making equipment there. Guess what? She raised over $12,000. Little 10-year-old girl.
Wow.
Because the library helped her make a video for her grandpa with Parkinson's disease. That's one of those, oh, that's so cool. Because she was able to make that at the library. I thought, so that's what a digital media lab can do. That's the power of a digital media lab. So what happens here? This kind of stuff. You might have music making tools in a digital media lab. So this will be for people who want to create videos, make music, do graphic design type things, maybe make a podcast. You can also turn that over and think about making oral history type things, scanning old photos. Genealogists would love that. That kind of stuff. This is there are a couple pictures of Skokie Public Library. They just found a sort of a classroom-sized room. I think it was a glorified closet or something like that. Put in 4 stations, big iMac computers. Some have microphones, some have keyboards. I think in their case, they dedicated one to music creation, one to video editing, one to graphic design, that kind of thing. And it's not just the young people that come in, which I think is also pretty cool. So Lily, the 10-year-old, came in, but these guys came in too. They wanted to, I don't know what they're doing, but maybe they're making hip-hop music. I'm not sure. This would be hip grandpop music, something like that. They have a green screen. In this case, they use chroma key paint and painted a wall. It's sometimes easier to do. And they have stuff you can check out. So it's not just coming to the library to use the equipment. This was one of those little flip cameras that were popular a few years ago. You can check out these little boxes of stuff to go make stuff outside of the library, which if you think about it, most people want to do that. Yay, I can come make a video about books in the library. Woo, that's exciting. They probably want to go make something that they really want to make. So let people check stuff out, right? Skokie has a lot of equipment. If you go to their library's website, they have a big, huge list. So that's what they did. There's quite, in the Chicago area, a lot of their libraries, a lot of the suburban libraries have different types of makerspaces and digital media labs. You might want to check those out. U-Media of Chicago, so they got a big grant and made this space for their teens. So this is really it's not so much a digital media lab or a makerspace, it's more of a hangout for teens only, but it has components of that. They have a 3D printer, they have a big, huge, like vinyl cutter type stuff. They also have a small music studio in it, so you can go and record a song. Pretty cool idea. This is closer to home for me, Lawrence Public Library in Lawrence, Kansas. Their city library recently built a new building, or gutted and sort of redid their building, and they have a 2-room music studio in the library. The equipment was donated. So actually, I'm a drummer, so the drum set, there's a custom drum shop in the Kansas City area that said, here, you guys can have a drum set for free. That's pretty cool, I think. All the other instruments came that way too. So now, we've got a control room that's separate. This is actually as big as some small recording studios, but it's in the library. The problem, of course, is that it can be a little noisy once in a while, right? If somebody's banging on the drums and somebody else is trying to write a paper, oh my, how does that work? But just the idea that people can come to the library and do different stuff, I think is pretty neat. So, and then there's a third aspect of some of this stuff called co-working spaces. So I mentioned the guys who are working in their bedroom and just want to go outside of their bedroom to do work. That's what co-working spaces are for. They're for freelancers, writers, marketers, home-based businesses, people who want to get out of the home and go work somewhere else besides their bedroom. So a couple of shots of these spaces. Usually they have comfy tables, collaborative spaces, Wi-Fi, coffee. Depending on the space, I've seen some in the Kansas City area that you can, usually you pay a monthly fee, small or large, depending on what your needs are. You can get a P.O. box, so it's not your home address. It won't be the same as your business address. Some of these spaces will let you rent out meeting rooms, or if you pay a little more, you can have your own private space. Some small startup type companies will have their offices here at one of these spaces. Pretty cool concept. Doesn't this sound sort of like what a library should do too? To me, we already have, my library, we already have people running their businesses from the library. Why not cater a bit more to that? Make it comfortable for them. Come alongside them and help them actively create their business and run it. There's some other cool stuff that's happening that don't really fit into these categories, but just to get the concept out there that libraries are not traditional anymore. You can print your book at the library through an espresso book machine. This is one in Darien Library up in Connecticut. So basically, it will take PDF files and that kind of thing, and you can watch your book being made, printed, bound. Here it is. Pretty cool, pretty awesome. This would work really well with the NaNoWriMo people, right? At the end of the month, hey, you can print it out. It will actually look like a book. That's awesome. Some libraries are checking out guitars, ukuleles, different types of musical instruments, having programs around those. Come learn to play Christmas carols at the library, that kind of thing on a ukulele. Pretty cool. And then I just chuckled to myself knowing a little bit about music. So somebody's job now has to be tuning the ukuleles. I just think that's funny. Thankfully, there's an app for that, so it's not that hard. But it's just, you guys aren't learning about that in your classes, are you? There's not like ukulele tuning 101. Pretty cool concept, though. Yeah, you can ask for that. There you go.
I said I have an app.
You have an app for yes,
And
that's
if I
right.
didn't have my own tablet, I could go to the library and get the app.
There you go.
from the library.
There you go. That's funny. Some libraries are just putting these things in their catalogs. So I happen to know what this is because my son has one. It's a little electronica type music thing. It makes old synth type noises. This library, Ann Arbor District Library, has this kind of stuff just in their catalog, so you can check out a book, you can check out the gadget. Very same way. Pretty cool. And then you can get green and check out seeds. Some libraries are doing that. I think they should get together with these people who are checking out small plots of land, right? So doing the square foot gardening in an urban area, that kind of thing. Some nonprofit type organizations do that kind of thing too. Why not have the library farm, right? Mentioned NaNoWriMo before already, so some libraries, mine is one, we hold events, we hold writers' nights. So all the writers gather in a room and bounce ideas off of each other and write together. Pretty cool, I think. So that's just some of the ideas that are out there. Lots of making going on in the world. And hopefully lots of making going on in the library as well. So if you're at a library and your director says, hey, we need to do some of this stuff, and you've got no budget, have fun, where should you start? So here are some of my thoughts on just ramping up a maker movement in your community. So the first idea would just be to do what we always do and get some books and magazines on this stuff. I mean, we already have, the how to do a painting kind of, how to write a poem type books, but there are some books and magazines out there that are devoted to the maker movement. So Make Magazine is a really good one to do, for example. There you go, you can make a water rocket. Woohoo! Get some books. There are quite a few books out there that are just show you how to get started on different types of projects. So if your library buys like the little bits or something like that, or Arduino computers or that kind of thing, you can get books that go along with that to help your customers make things. And again, we've always done that. I don't know if you can see that. This is a drawing for cabinet makers book from a long time ago. So again, we've had some of this stuff, but you can focus a little more on it and maybe move some of those types of books that have been sitting gathering dust in your collection for years, move it over with the maker stuff. Give it a new use. Also, find out what already exists in your town. So, and I'll mention these in a second, but in my town we have a community makerspace popping up, which also has a co-working space, and then there's at least one other co-working space popping up right now as well. Plus, there are robotics clubs, a couple of them in town for kids, and older people who want to learn how to make robots. Lego clubs, maker clubs, that kind of thing. Some of these, the group that's working on the makerspace has just had sort of a Facebook group and a weekly gathering for a couple of years now. They've grown out of that, and I'll share that in a second. But my guess is if you're working in a library, this kind of stuff is probably happening already around you somewhere. So go connect with them first to find out what they need. Don't necessarily say, I'll make what they're making. Maybe partner with them and say, what do you not have? What do you really need? Oh, we need space. Oh, we need this kind of equipment. Oh, we need, that kind of thing. And then see if the library can come alongside that for starters. Hold some fun events, right? So instead of authors, have one of the robot makers come and show what they do. Why not, right? Have a freelancer come talk about his or her home-based business, what they do, how they do it, how they make money, that kind of thing. It can be really interesting for your business, for your professional adults in town, right? poll the community, ask them what they want. So you can do that in different ways. You can just ask when they come into the library. You can do surveys, put it up on your website, that kind of thing. Use social media to send them out. Find out what your community wants to do. And then start small. You don't always have to say, okay, I'm going to build this huge thing with the whole 4th floor of the library. Maybe just buy a Mac with iMovie and GarageBand, set it up in the teen room, see what happens. For starters, small investment, and then maybe put up a sign that says, you know, what's missing? What else would you like to see? And you can grow from there. So that's sort of kind of what my library is doing. I'll tell you what we're doing. I say with a little help from our friends, because our friends of the library group gave us a chunk of money to play with. I'll say it that way here. They gave me $12,000 and said, go make a small makerspace. We're considering it a pilot project, so we'll grow it or shrink it as needed. So this room, so our library, just a little bit about our library. We are a pretty large library, 220 some staff, one big building. We serve the whole county, so we have, instead of branch libraries, we have like 18 bookmobile stops, and then book drops and book lockers where you can put holds on books like in a grocery store or something like that throughout the community. But one big building. And in one of our huge rooms in the big building, this is in our media room, I think that's what we call it. So all the new books and new videos and that kind of stuff are here. A lot of computers are here as well. We have this odd little room that didn't have a door on it because I think the library is fairly new. It was built, maybe it was opened in 2003 or something like that. They gutted an old building and redid it. And that was supposed to be like the business librarian professional help area. Didn't last that long. So we just put a couple of computers in there, so it's sort of like a study room. And what we're doing is putting a door on it with a key that you check out at the reference desk. And that's where our digital media lab type makerspace is going. So we are planning to offer quite a bit of stuff. So we'll have 2 iMac computers in there, microphones, a couple of MIDI keyboards for music making, some video cameras and some digital cameras, so you can make that kind of media as well. The Adobe Creative Suite on both of them, so you can do art type things or graphic design. Make your business brochure. We've got a scanner, we've got a little drawing pad in there for the more creative types. And we've got 1, possibly 2 3D printers that we're going to not put in that room. We're going to actually put those in sort of the main media room area so people can see things being made, which will sort of market the rest of the stuff. We're hoping. We'll see. That's pretty much what we're doing. We've got a couple of other gadgets as well, but that's what we're doing for starters. And then so our goal will be to get people in there, using it, set up some programs around it, and then if the room's booked all the time, then it becomes really difficult. I'll say, yay, it's busy. It's been busy for 6 months. Now we have to get an architect and move staff and figure out how to expand the space. That's the hard thing. We found a little space, we don't have a big space. So more on that next year, hopefully. That's what we're doing. So our goal is, and other libraries' goals, should be creative with these pilot projects. Some libraries might think, well, we don't have a ton of hackerspace geeks in the community. And that's okay, because maybe you have a lot of crafters. Maybe you have people who like to make beer. That's a huge craft. We actually have some classes on that at the library. Maybe you have people who want to transfer their old wedding videos to a digital format, or their old cassette tapes to a digital format. That's something you could offer. Oral history, scanning in old photos, and teaching them how to remove all the little spots and creases and stuff. That's a kind of maker space type concept too. So it doesn't have to be the local geek entrepreneur type thing. It can be pretty much anything you want it to be. And then, of course, space can be an issue. Most libraries will tell me, oh, we have no space. But then they have spaces like this that are just weird nooks and crannies in their building that they don't really know what to do with because the shelf doesn't fit there because of ADA compliance kind of thing. So why not put your makerspace right there, right? If it's a really little library, they don't have to have a whole space. They can have a bin and have Maker Mondays. Pull it out every Monday for kids or teens or grown-ups even, right? You can always find space for your priorities, so look for that. Money might be a little harder. Have to budget for it ultimately. I'm cheating by having the Friends of the Library give me money for that, but to continue it, we have to include upkeep and that kind of thing in the library's budget. And then also form partnerships. So in my library's case, here's what we're doing. So this is 712 Innovations. It's our community makerspace. What they're doing, which is a really cool idea. So there were a couple of groups in Topeka that were popping up at the same time saying, hey, we want a makerspace. Hey, we would like to create a co-working space. They came together, and lo and behold, other organizations were interested in this. So they got a couple of partners. So the library is a partner. Go Topeka, which is our local economic development group in town, a university's small business development center, the city's chamber of commerce, the city itself, a few different groups like that. So from local government, from libraries, from educational things, from nonprofits, came together to help make this. And what they're doing is it's not just a makerspace, so it's part makerspace, part co-working space, with the idea that there's a third part. So they get I'll say it this way, they'll get the geek in the makerspace, making cool stuff, doesn't really know what to do with it. He's just like, this is the coolest thing ever. It does this new thing I've never seen before. But I don't know how to set up a business. I just know how to make really weird stuff. Connected that person with the freelance person in the co-working space who knows how to market, write a business plan, etc. Maybe connect them with the librarian who can help with some of that too. And then the third part will be that incubator startup concept that some of these, some small business development centers are very interested in, some makerspaces are very interested in, because what that does, if it's successful, is creates a new business in town that's bringing in money for Topeka. Yay. Do that times 20, we've created 20 businesses. Wouldn't that be awesome if the library had a part in that? So then when you go to your mayor and your city council and say, well, how is the library helping the economic vitality of the city? You have proof. You can say, well, we've helped create these businesses. Pretty cool idea. One that's fairly unique too, so I have high hopes for it. We'll see. So all that to say, I think we're in the midst of a library revolution, which I think is pretty freaking cool. So is this a new philosophy? Sort of yes, sort of no, really. It's maybe an old philosophy, being a bit more proactive with it and putting a new face on it. I think it's really cool. And at the same time, it's the stuff we've always done. We've always helped people better themselves. That's sort of what a library does. That's why we have all this stuff that we let people check out for free. So it's just, the new part is being really, really active in content creation, offering tools to help with that content creation, and maybe doing some training so people don't cut off fingers, because fingers are good. I like my fingers. And then doing it ourselves. So it's sort of that old idea of mixing the peanut butter and the chocolate together and making that Reese's peanut butter cup. I'm dating myself because I remember those commercials when I was a kid. They were pretty awesome. And it's really hard to find a photo like that in Flickr, just saying. But what you're doing is taking the library, who knows how to do some of these things already, maybe has a bit of a budget for it, connecting that with the creators who want to do stuff, but they need that organization to help. Bringing it together and making cool stuff, right? So that is my presentation. Are there any questions or comments or thoughts? Yes?
I have one more on the practical side. So I sew. So I'm imagining having sewing machines available. Sewing machines can be very touchy. They can break. A lot of things can break on them. So is it always going to be required that the librarian who knows how to sew has to be there at the library at that time, or is it only certain people, once you know they've been trained, are allowed to use them? How does it work with stuff that can break, like guitars, you know, things like that? How do you manage who uses what and when?
Oh, that brings up two good questions. The two hardest ones, too. Thank you. Well, the first one, just as far as customer training, really depends. I would say, you know, in our case, we're just having this stuff and saying, go knock yourselves out. I will help you turn it on. And then you need to do it from there. Which would be how I would help somebody with Excel spreadsheets anyway. Say, here it is. Have fun with those cells. I don't know what to do from there. It's sort of that. And then if they need more help, you know, you would probably have a few people in your organization who do a little more and could sit down, sort of like how a library might schedule a reference appointment right now for more in-depth research. Be the same kind of thing. So, oh, you really need some help. Well, come to me Tuesday at 4 o'clock and we'll figure it out. You know, that kind of thing. If it's going to maim or injure somebody, there might need a little more. I know other makerspaces in town will have a waiver form when you sign up, because usually it's, you know, signing up means it's a monthly fee and you're a member, and part of that joining the member kind of thing, joining the makerspace, would be those medical form type things. If you hurt yourself, it's your own fault, go away, kind of, with much better legal language in there. A library might have to do that too if you're going to have, you know, I mean, that's something we were thinking about as we're putting a 3D printer out there. You know, the tip of those 3D printers heats up to like 250 degrees, so certainly somebody would never be stupid enough to go, oh, what's that?
It's also about like the cost of the library if the patron breaks it from not knowing how to use it, or they're fooling around because lack of supervision or something like that. I mean, that can get expensive.
So, yes, it could. So if you think you need to have a training class first, some libraries do that. They say, come to the Maker 101 session first, and then we'll set you free after that, after you pass it. So that's a way to do it. Different ways to do that. I mean, we've got almost 200 computers in our library. People break those once in a while too. So I'm the IT guy. I'm like, yeah, that happens. Our staff breaks them too. So, but the other part of that question, if I remember what it was, I'm not remembering what it was. So I'll pass that one until it comes around again. Yeah.
A question, excuse me, from our online audience, and a lot of the stuff that you showed was for adults and teenagers, and they were wondering if you know of the contents of any programs for elementary school age students?
Sure. Probably not specifics, but certainly there are things like this for elementary students. There are, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Don't remember it right now. No, not Scholastic. This is more of a geeky company. No, Makey. Well, I'll use Makey as an example. Not the one I was thinking of, but that works. So, like Makey, they have lots of little gadgets and gizmos that are more simple to use. That you could use, like the banana piano things that some of you might have seen before. That kind of thing, or little LED flashing things. There's a company that'll make little stuffed animal things that you can sew yourself, but then you put a little chip in it too, and so it will, if you touch it, it'll do things, you know, that kind of thing. So there are things like that. Honestly, the Affinia 3D printers, they are marketing to schools. So elementary schools are getting those. MakerBot is wanting to do that as well. So certainly some schools are getting into that as well. So well, I think there are a lot of different avenues for the littler kids too, definitely. Somebody over here had their hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to know if you could talk a bit about library communities exchanging in kind of a way that, like, if you have two towns very close by, like, they might not both get 3D printers, but they might collaborate and have, resources spread throughout
Sure.
local communities.
Okay, so she was asking about maybe a couple of close together libraries that aren't part of the same system but collaborating anyway. That happens, definitely. So some if they're all independent libraries, they could just figure it out, probably a collaborative sharing type thing. But like in Kansas, Kansas is divided up into 5 or 6 regional systems. And then there's like, my library is part of NECLS, the Northeast Kansas Library, whatever those initials stand for. We're big enough that we don't really need a lot of help from them, so to speak, but there are a lot of little libraries, because Kansas is pretty rural, that do need a lot of help. So they're set up to, they do a lot of stuff, but one thing they will do will be share equipment like that. So you could check it out for a month from the regional consortium, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely a way that a small library with a small budget could get their hands into some of the stuff. So good idea. Yeah.
So in one of my classes recently, we talked a little bit about this, and one of the questions that the professor presented was, is this a fad?
That's why, so is this a fad? That's why I presented all that stuff at the beginning. Libraries have always been about making stuff.
Right.
Getting a 3D printer could be a fad. Right now, that whole concept of 3D printing is, if you remove just the making little funny statues of Yoda kind of thing out from it, and see what's really going on in the 3D printing world, that's not a fad at all. It's going to probably be one of the revolutions of this century, I would guess. So we'll see a lot more of that. I don't think it's a fad. I think the concept in general is just things are cheap enough and easy enough to do now that we can do some of this stuff ourselves with some help sometimes. So I think Twitter had another question, or
Yes, we have
upstream.
a lot of grant resources for literacy programs and other traditional library things. So we were wondering, is there a list somewhere for grants that specialize in this kind of a project, or how would you go about finding those grants?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a list. Sounds like a project for somebody's class. Somebody needs to make it. There are definitely a lot of that kind of stuff out there, small and big grants. There might be a wiki out there for 3D printers or makerspaces in libraries. I'm not sure. Really cool thought though.
I just want to add something about children, and both in school and public libraries. I think that we impose on children what they ought to be doing and what they ought to be reading and what they ought to be studying so much. And if we think about makerspaces in a larger sense, for instance, as David was saying, the digital making, if we present iPads with all the possible creativity apps and suites or palettes, then we present for students an opportunity to kind of have that 20%, that genius time that is so missing in so many of their lives because of high stakes assessments and the need to cover curriculum. When a student walks into a library, traditionally they could ask for a book that they need to study for curriculum, but they could also ask for something that really is one of their passions or interests. And in the same way, there's no reason that those passions or interests can't be explored with stuff, right? So we can explore in so many different media. Limiting students to their passions in print seems a narrow way to look at what a library might be. And so maybe we'll see 3D printers in the future, and maybe they'll continue to come down in price. But I really think I'd like to have ukuleles and sewing machines and bead making, as David, and all those opportunities. And a number of libraries are doing that in schools as stations, where students can pop in and go from one station, and the stations change. And the stations adjust idiosyncratically. So as you discover more about students' passions and interests, then you shift them up. And I've also been thinking about the notion of like I grew up in the 1950s, and there was stuff in garages for kids to play with. You could take apart old radios. You could tinker. There's less to tinker with right now. And that tinkering is serious learning, that collaboration where kids get together and tinker together and play with stuff. And so I would love, my dream is to see libraries that enable this kind of hands-on learning, as well as the learning that happens when they read great books or not so great books. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
To go along with those ideas, do you think that any kind of makerspace, any kind of lab has to be separate for adults and teens? Because I feel that they should be, that, you know, there's undue pressure, like when an adult is sitting at a computer working on something that seems very serious, and a teen's just like goofing off to the side. So I'm curious, like in a small library like where I am, I feel like it's not practical or logical to have two separate spaces. So like how do you make them work for each unique group with their own, you know,
That's a good
needs?
question. So should you have separate spaces for like teens and adults, or one big space for everybody? There's a few different ways to answer that. So one, the David Lee King answer, I'll say it that way, is a lot of libraries tend to focus on kids and teens and don't focus on 20s and 30s and 40s professionals. Teens are awesome. I've got 3 of them. They're with us for a short time. They're only teenagers for this long, and then they go off to college and probably move away. Whereas your 25-year-old inventor can be a lifelong library user. Focus on both. It's important, you know, of course, to help teens learn to do different and new things, and to keep them out of trouble too. I think maybe it's more important to focus on the people that are paying your tax dollars and keep them in your community, help them develop things. So do both, I would say. And now, as far as the space goes, also a weird answer for that one, just because my library had to really think through this. We have a small room with a door on it. We were thinking, is it creepy to have a 12-year-old working in there with a 54-year-old guy? Depends, right? So we had to take that into consideration. Just something you have to talk through. We have lots of security cameras around our building, so we do have a cutoff range, and we'll watch it and develop that as needed. But highly urban area, maybe a more open space would be good. Maybe keeping them separate would be good. Smaller community, sleepy community like Topeka, maybe it's not as big of a deal. Don't know. But something to consider to talk through.
Got another question from our online audience. People were curious, what is involved in staff training for all
That's
these?
the other thing I was going to answer that you brought up right at the beginning. Staff training. A few different ways to do that. So some libraries hire individuals to take care of all the geek stuff because they don't want to do it or don't have the expertise or whatever. Some libraries get in volunteers, like if they're close to Rutgers, maybe they'll hire some of the makerspace people and have them help in their public library once in a while. Then the third way to do it is to train your staff. A little harder, but that would be my option. That's what we're going to do at Topeka, just because what our philosophy is if it's on the public floor, if we're offering it, all our staff need to know how to use it. So that counts for the library catalog, that counts for our ProQuest databases, that would count for GarageBand. which means right now we have a staff member training people in how to plug up a microphone into a doohickey into the Mac and get a signal in GarageBand. And then they're done, because they're not going to help you create your music, but they have to know how to do that little basic part of it. Really different job for a librarian, right? It's no different than opening up Excel, because we have that on our public computers too, right? So that's how I treat it. I think that's a really important concept, though. If you're going to have it as part of your, a service point in your library that you're paying a lot of money for, maybe you should train your staff. That's what I think. Good question. I'm glad they mentioned that. I think maybe we have time for one or two more questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you have a library that doesn't really have the money or space or whatever to have its own little maker space or maker lab, what would you say would be some good things that you can do as programming? Because a lot of what I see, it seems to be like, get a bunch of kids together and we have them tinkering in our maker space. Well, I can't really do that. I have to have a set program, and this is what we're going to do. And we don't really have, a big supply of children that are just ready to go. I have to really grab them with something interesting to get them to come into the library. There are some kits from quite a few different companies nowadays that you can buy that are fun to geeky. More geeky stuff would be like Arduino kits that you can learn how to do some basic programming and make things happen. There are some really simple things like how to, solder an LED light together, that kind of thing. There are more fun things to do, like build a small little, I'm blanking, what are those things called?
Catapults?
Yeah, thank you.
Catapults.
Catapults. To throw things, and then it's a game too, because then you set up something at the other end and see whose catapult does the best job. Lots of different kit-based things that are fairly inexpensive. It says David, who works at the big library, that you can buy for programs. That could be a really good way to go, because it's sort of like the program in a box. It's pretty handy that way.
I think that there are crowdsource funding sources right now. Jennifer Lagarde, 2 months ago, said, can you help us get a 3D printer? She put it on, I don't remember whether it was Kickstarter, she tweeted to all her library friends, she had the 3D printer in 2 days. But I want us to think more broadly about this. What about getting a local carpenter to help you create a puppet stage and just throw the puppets that you've already got around the library over there, or throw some costumes into a bin and bring out a little flip camera that you might have had from a couple of years ago. I mean, you're only limited by your own creativity here, and it doesn't, as David said and everybody else, it doesn't need to be a 3D printer, and it's about thinking about your collection in a much broader way, and people being part of the collection. So perhaps you bring in that local carpenter who might be retired for a day, an afternoon. He becomes part of the collection, or she becomes part of the collection.
Mm-hmm.
We had one more online question. People were curious how this changed, like the traffic and user statistics in your library.
Well, we're opening December 8th. So it has not changed anything yet. Yeah.
You were talking about metrics earlier, how we might really need to rethink what use looks like and how we document it.
Yeah. So what we will be measuring will be, we'll have a few different things we can measure. How many, we'll have 2 keys you can check out. They'll actually, I think, be in the catalog. So you can measure checkouts. You can measure how many people printed things. You could measure just use of the room, that kind of stuff. And then since there's only 2 stations in there, we'll then base that, we'll say, okay, so it's to capacity 70% of the week, maybe. That would be awesome. Then from there we'll say, okay, we need to figure out how to expand from there. So, and I think that's a lot of what libraries generally do. They're counting bodies in the room, counting attendance at programs, counting hours printed on a 3D printer or use of certain equipment. It's that kind of stuff.
Do people who come in for the makerspace, in any library, is there a lot of like crossover between the rest of the collection and the makerspace collection, or people there for one or another?
Generally not much crossover, I don't think. They're usually in very separate sections of the library just because oftentimes it can be noisy. But it really depends on the library. Like the one picture I showed, they put it right in the middle of the building. So it really depends on the building. But, you know, hopefully it's attracting a new clientele that hasn't really come into the library much because we didn't have anything to offer them. So that's what I would hope for. Well,
Here's some, and just one more thing.
Okay.
Have you seen the Imaginon in Charlotte?
mhm.
It's all maker, really. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that's, so the Imaginon, it's a sort of a library branch, but it's all for making stuff. I think it was team-based at the time.
Yeah.
But really cool new service, and yeah, they would never come there for traditional library stuff. Cool idea. Well, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. We're very grateful that you traveled and shared your time with us tonight. Please, let's thank David again. I forgot it. It's in my office, so remind me to get it for you. So anyway, this is a reminder for those of you in 502 to write your reflections. And I do want to tell you what's coming up. On February 18th, we're going to have Laura Fleming, who's local, who also happens to have a makerspace. I don't know if you know Laura. Laura is going to be here, and Shannon Miller, who lives both in Colorado and Van Meter, Iowa now. And they're going to be talking about what's happening with youth services, all sorts of changes that are coming along. On March 11th, I can't tell you what's happening yet because I haven't yet confirmed it, but it's going to be good. And then on April 8th, this is really exciting, Rutgers alum Naomi House, do you know her?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from IneedALibraryJob.com is coming. And we're going to get a professional portrait photographer to take your LinkedIn photos, and I'm trying to get a LinkedIn profile expert here. So some of you who are graduating might leave that night with a fully formed, or well, the beginnings of a really good LinkedIn profile. And those of you who are just beginning a career search, you'll get a head start on that. So I'm real excited about that. And I guess that's it for tonight. And we'll be happy to take a little few questions as you leave and mingle with each other for a little bit, take the rest of the food, and have a great night and stay warm, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.